You're watching A News. I'm Leila Masimova. Here's the top stories for today. Stocks slide again as the US forges ahead with 104% tariffs on China. At least 98 people have been killed and more than 150 injured after a roof collapse at a nightclub in Dominican Republic's capital, Santo Domingo. Iran says it is ready for a nuclear deal if the US stops military threats. Wall Street fell sharply today after early optimism that the US might delay tariffs or reach a deal with major trading partners quickly faded. Despite nearly 70 countries seeking negotiations, no immediate progress has been made, sending markets lower.
Wall Street experienced a sharp drop as fears over US trade tariffs took a toll on the market. After an early rally, investor optimism quickly faded when it became clear that the US would not delay its new tariffs on imports. The S&P 500, a key US stock market index, closed below 5,000 points for the first time in almost a year. The sharp declines in US stock markets have been driven by growing concerns about President Donald Trump's tariffs, which are set to take effect tomorrow. These new duties, particularly the 104% tariffs on Chinese goods, have triggered fears of a wider global trade war.
The level of uncertainty in the marketplace certainly is high right now. It's important for investors to remember that this is an event that is a man-made crisis. Ostensibly, it could be a man-made correction of some sorts. We saw that a little bit yesterday when the NASDAQ moved 1,400 points on the rumor of an announcement that maybe there was going to be a pause. So there is still a lot of movement. Investors' fingers are on the buy or the sell button based on what the longevity of tariffs ends up looking like. And it's important to put this within context. While it is an uncertain period of time, nobody knows what the next move of the administration is going to be.
US stock markets have already lost trillions of dollars in value since the tariff announcements, and the situation has raised concerns about a potential global recession. Economists have warned that US consumers are likely to face higher prices on everything from sneakers to wine as a result of the trade war. However, the full effects of the tax hikes may not be felt for some time. Goods already in transit before the midnight deadline will be exempt from the new levies as long as they arrive in the US by the 27th of May. Meanwhile, the White House says many countries have reached out to them in an attempt to reduce the effects of the tariffs, but so far, no significant agreements have been made.
In total, since the Liberation Day announcement, nearly 70 countries have already reached out to the president to begin a negotiation. Countries are falling over themselves to reform their unfair trade practices and free open their markets to our country. The president's message has been simple and consistent from the beginning. To countries around the world, bring us your best offers, and he will listen. Deals will only be made if they benefit American workers and address our nation's crippling trade deficits.
The global trade tensions are also being felt in Asia, with stock markets showing signs of stress. In South Korea, the currency has dropped to a 16-year low, while Japan's Nikkei index saw a sharp decline. President Trump says he's not done with tariffs yet. In a recent conversation with Republican lawmakers, he mentioned plans to introduce what he calls major tariffs on pharmaceutical imports, which had previously been exempt from the new tax hikes.
The Asian stock markets took a sharp dive as US President Donald Trump's 104% tariffs on China's goods went into effect, exacerbating fears of a global recession.
Asian stocks took a major hit as the impact of US President Donald Trump's controversial tariffs on China sent shockwaves through the global markets. In China, the Shanghai Composite Index opened lower, falling by 1.12% as concerns over the tax hike intensified. Meanwhile, Japan's Nikkei Index plummeted by over 3%, with technology stocks leading the sell-off. The tariffs, which have increased to a staggering 104% on Chinese imports, are a direct response to Beijing's counter-tariffs. This move has deepened concerns of an escalating trade war, with China vowing to resist what it calls economic blackmail. Financial markets have responded swiftly, with Asian indexes, including Hong Kong's Hang Seng and Taiwan's benchmark stock index, also recording significant declines. South Korea was not spared either, with its Kospi index falling to its lowest point since November 2023. The country's currency, the won, tumbled to a more than 16-year low, heightening concerns about the broader economic impact. Residents in Seoul expressed growing anxiety over the tariffs' potential effects on job opportunities and economic stability.
It feels disappointing that only the interests of the United States are being prioritized, rather than each country or company striving for mutual prosperity.
From 1 o'clock in the afternoon local time, the tariffs imposed by President Trump will take effect, while our country is facing a difficult economic situation. I'm worried about the labour shortage, the job hunting difficulties, and the struggles of job seekers. I'm also concerned about the economic stagnation and the economic cycle in local economies. As a citizen of South Korea, I am worried.
These developments followed a tumultuous day in the US markets on Tuesday, where the S&P 500 closed below the 5,000-point mark for the first time in nearly a year, reflecting growing investor pessimism. The ripple effects of the trade tensions were also felt in the oil market, with both Brent and US West Texas Intermediate crude futures ending lower due to mounting recession concerns. Meanwhile, the US dollar, which has already been battered by the ongoing tariff turmoil, remained weak against other major currencies.
South Korea is taking swift action to shield its automobile industry from a fresh wave of US tariffs. Seoul has unveiled emergency support measures to counter the fallout from a 25% import duty announced by US President Donald Trump.
South Korea has announced emergency support for its auto sector. Seoul is rushing to cushion the blow to one of the country's most vital industries. It follows the United States' 25% tariff on imported cars and light trucks, which begin on Thursday. As part of the emergency package, Seoul will temporarily cut automobile purchase taxes. The tax will drop from 5 to 3.5% until June. These measures include increased financial support, tax breaks and expanded subsidies for automakers.
The automobile industry is a cornerstone of our economy, supporting 340,000 jobs. Its ecosystem, made up of around 20,000 parts suppliers, would be difficult to recover once disrupted. That's why it is crucial for the public and private sectors to work together to protect it.
The government plans to raise policy financing for automakers to 15 trillion won, which is more than 10 billion US dollars. This is an increase from the previously planned 13 trillion won. US President Donald Trump says he had a great call on Tuesday with South Korea's acting president about working out a better deal for both countries. It follows Seoul vowing to pursue negotiations and expand alternative export markets in a bid to soften the blow of the tariffs.
Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro has signed an economic emergency decree. The move is aimed to preserve the country's economic balance in the face of tariffs and the cancellation of licenses. It comes in response to a series of economic measures implemented by US President Donald Trump. Last month, the Trump administration began to suspend many authorizations linked to oil companies operating in Venezuela. Those corporations face a deadline of the 27th of May to liquidate their operations. The U.S. has also imposed secondary tariffs on oil and gas exports, aiming to further isolate the country's economy and restrict its oil revenue. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says nobody wins with a trade war. He's concerned new US tariffs could badly affect vulnerable developing countries. His comments come as President Donald Trump pushes ahead with a 10% baseline tariff, with higher rates set to begin this week.
Trade wars are extremely negative. Nobody wins with a trade war. Everybody tends to lose. And I'm particularly worried with the most vulnerable developing countries, in which the impact will be more devastating. I sincerely hope that we will have no recession, because a recession will have dramatic consequences, especially for the poorest people in the world.
US President Donald Trump aims to boost the country's coal production. He signed an executive order which runs against global efforts to curb carbon emissions. It means coal plants that were going to be retired will be saved.
The coal industry is set to be brought back to life in the U.S. President Donald Trump has signed executive orders to boost production. The move is part of his campaign promise to increase the country's energy output. The dying industry generates less than 20% of American electricity due to the rise of natural gas, wind, and solar power. Despite the declining use, Trump says growing demand for electricity from data centers, electric vehicles, and crypto mining are the reason.
Under this order, I'm also directing Secretary Wright to use billions of dollars in federal funding to invest in the next generation of coal technology, which is an amazing technology in terms of getting the full potential of coal and also doing it a very clean, environmental way.
The orders invoke the 1950 Defense Production Act to support struggling coal plants and consider whether coal used in steel production is a critical mineral.
This executive order is going to promote grid security and reliability by ensuring in part that our grid policies are focused on secure and effective energy production and energy transmission, as opposed to woke policies that discriminate against secure sources of power like coal and other fossil fuels.
However, this move runs against global efforts to curb carbon emissions. The U.S. is the second biggest emitter of the toxic gases, the first being China. According to the latest figures from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency in 2022, U.S. greenhouse gas emissions totaled more than 6,000 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents.
At least 98 people were killed and more than 150 injured after the roof of the jet-set nightclub in the Dominican capital, Santo Domingo, collapsed on Tuesday. The tragedy happened at an iconic nightclub where politicians, athletes and others were attending a concert. Rescue teams searched through the night for survivors under the rubble. President Luis Abinader says all agencies were working non-stop to help the victims. The cause of the collapse remains under the investigation. Russian forces have launched a major drone attack on Ukrainian cities Dnipro, Kharkiv and Kramatorsk on Tuesday evening, injuring at least 22 people. That's according to Ukrainian authorities. The Ukrainian Air Force reported that 55 drones were fired, with 32 intercepted and another 8 disrupted by electronic countermeasures. Authorities confirmed that the attacks caused fires and property damage, with 14 people injured in Dnipro's residential areas. The exact fate of 15 drones remains unclear. Earlier, for the first time, President Volodymyr Zelensky has confirmed that Ukrainian forces are operating within Russia's Belgorod region. The strategic move aims to divert Russian offensives from Ukraine's Sumy and Kharkiv regions, marking a significant escalation in the conflict. Joining me now to discuss this further is Ukrainian political scientist Taras Kuzio from London. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
How significant is this move by Kiev? Will it make a difference?
Well, this is just a continuation of the earlier advance to the Kursk region, which is the north of Belgorod. This is an attempt to push Russian forces away from the border because they keep attacking border towns and villages with offensives and with military equipment. And so it's a way, it's just simply a continuation to firstly push the Russian troops away from the border, and secondly to distract Russian troops away from the main area of the fighting, which is to the south in the Donbas region.
And is Ukraine shifting from defense to attack in its military strategy?
It's a mixture of the two. It's both defensive and offensive. Obviously, during these so-called peace negotiations that the United States is organizing, it's always good to control Russian territory because this could be used as a bargaining chip with Russia over exchanging other territory that Russia occupies. So it's also, I would say, both offensive and defensive.
Thank you for your answers.
Thank you.
Iran is ready to engage with the U.S. at talks on Saturday over its nuclear program with a view to seal a deal. As according to its Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, Tehran has emphasized that progress depends on Washington dropping the threat of military action. Iranian officials say discussions will be indirect despite Trump's earlier claims of direct talks. Iran insists it won't tolerate pressure in negotiations. This comes after Trump's 2018 withdrawal from the 2015 nuclear agreement, followed by warnings of severe consequences if talks fail.
We will impose a 25% tariff on all foreign-made.
U.S. and Russian delegations will meet for a second time in Istanbul on Thursday. The State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce says the talks will focus on U.S. embassy operations and not on Ukraine.
On April 10th, U.S. and Russian delegations will meet for a second time in Istanbul to try to make progress on further stabilizing the operations of our bilateral missions. So that is happening in Istanbul. There are no political or security issues on the agenda, and Ukraine is not, absolutely not on the agenda. These talks are solely focused on our embassy operations, not on normalizing a bilateral relationship overall, which can only happen, as we've noted, once there is peace between Russia and Ukraine.
Almost 4 years after the U.S. military and NATO's withdrawal from Afghanistan, America is regaining control of its previous air base at Bagram near Kabul. It's according to Afghanistan's Karma Press. It's reported the move follows a request from the Taliban government. However, local officials are calling the news propaganda.
The United States has reportedly regained control of the strategic Bagram air base in eastern Afghanistan, north of Kabul. It's amid rising tensions in the region and speculation of potential strikes on Iran. According to specialized U.S. sources and Afghan online news service Karma Press, the move comes at the request of the Taliban government. Last week, several U.S. Air Force C-17 Globemaster aircraft landed at the base, carrying military vehicles, advanced equipment, and high-ranking intelligence personnel. Among them, reports suggest, was CIA Deputy Director Michael Ellis. Afghan journalist Zarq Shabab confirmed the arrival of the aircraft, while Afghan news service Karma Press echoed claims that an official from the CIA was on board. Despite these developments, neither the U.S. government nor Taliban officials have formally confirmed the redeployment of American forces to Afghanistan following their 2021 withdrawal. Taliban spokesman Zabihullah Mujahid publicly dismissed the reports as propaganda, insisting that no foreign military presence is permitted on Afghan soil. However, military analysts note Bagram's critical strategic value. Situated near both Iran and China, the base offers a forward operating platform should U.S. military actions escalate in the region. An official announcement regarding the U.S. reassuming full control of the base is expected as early as this week.
The 7th ADA University Policy Forum takes place in Baku today. Joining us, over 80 global experts and policy makers gathered to discuss pressing geopolitical, regional and economic challenges. The high-level international forum themed Facing the New World Order opened on April 8 at Karabakh University in Hankendi and continues today at ADA University in Baku. Our Arkan Mashov has more from the venue.
Hello, Leila. Yes, indeed. Today is day 2 of ADA University Policy Forum. As you mentioned earlier, yesterday the participants, actually 80 participants from 44 countries, were in Hankendi city of Azerbaijan, and the panel discussions there were related to the shifts in geopolitics, regional autonomy, regional sovereignty, and some other related matters. And today is, of course, day 2, the centerpiece of this forum, wherein President Aliyev delivered his keynote speech, which lasted about 20-30 minutes, and then he responded to questions, about 12-15 questions related to different matters. And fundamentally, of course, the first element is related to Azerbaijani-Armenian peace process. We have reached a qualitatively new level in peace dynamics, but there are some prerequisites. President Aliyev reflected on the internal dynamics in Armenia, describing dividing the revanchist forces in Armenia into 2 separate groups, describing the government as a passive revanchist group and the opposition people who are very active as being active revanchist forces. He also talked about, of course, the connectivity in the South Caucasus, reflecting on events in Georgia, about some technologies being employed by different forces in order to change governments in different parts of the world. He talked extensively about Azerbaijan's increasing role in terms of acting as a mediator between different actors in the context of Israeli-Turkish dynamics. He was very open. He said that in the past, Azerbaijan played an active role. This role was behind closed doors, of course, and he hinted at the possibility that Azerbaijan is currently actually proactively involved in normalizing relations between Israel and Turkey. A number of things have been reflected upon, and of course, in terms of the wider field of conflict, he referred to the Israeli-Palestinian matters as well, and in wider, of course, Russia-China confrontation and many other related matters, and also, of course, Azerbaijan's increasing energy powers, and also Azerbaijan's role in terms of the energy provision in southeastern Europe. In particular, he said that 50% of the energy needs of Bulgaria currently actually being provided by means of Azerbaijani gas, and it looks like that this role will be increased from now on. And in terms of the other issues he reflected on, I think one of the key elements, of course, about the Azerbaijani-US relations, he reiterated some of the points about the previous administrations, Blinken-Biden administration, their role, which was described by President Aliyev as being not so positive, and he made it very clear that there are some hopes that with this new administration in this region, the United States will play a more proactive and more positive role, of course. And he said that some emergent signs of that are already there, and probably they will be augmented from now on as well. He mentioned about the conflicts in different parts of the world, described USAID as monster number 1, and also in many ways encouraged the government in Washington, D.C. to be more proactive and to deepen this process of dealing with some of the elements which have been against the current administration. On the whole, this ADA Policy Forum is still, of course, underway. There will be a couple of panel discussions, but the centerpiece of the forum is President's speech and answers, and of course some of the points mentioned therein will form the agenda and narrative from now on. Thank you, Leila. Okan, A News.
Azerbaijan has always supports and will continue to support Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty. President of Azerbaijan Ilham Aliyev passed this message during the Q&A session of the 7th ADA University Policy Forum themed Facing the New World Order. During his answer, the president underlined that no country will agree to compromise on its territorial integrity and to expect Ukraine to agree that they will sacrifice the international recognized territory in exchange of peace wouldn't be fair and realistic.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. Thank you for hosting us. Congratulations again on both the liberation of the territories and on the reconstruction that we saw yesterday. I'm Omar Ashur from the Doha Institute in Qatar, but also in the University of Exeter in the UK. My question is about Ukraine. What is the Azerbaijani position vis-à-vis the Russian war on Ukraine? Now, the situation or the war has been going on now almost 12 years, and it is affecting both the global and the regional environment, including the Caucasus, Europe, and the Middle East, and even the Indo-Pacific area. As a president of a country that has major military achievements and diplomatic achievements, how do you envision the end of this war? Thank you.
First, on our position on the war between Russia and Ukraine, we always support and will continue to support Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty. And as a country which suffered from occupation and deterioration of our territorial integrity, we, of course, fully understand this situation. So everyone whom you may ask will say that we want war to stop immediately. Yes, we also want. But the main question is how, and whether this ceasefire, potential ceasefire, or how to say, temporary ceasefire will be sustainable or not. As a country which had 2 wars, active wars, and period in between, I can tell you that ceasefire never stops war, never. And it didn't stop in our case. It's just a temporary relief for countries to regroup, to mobilize, and to start again. Second, what ceasefire means. It's also important because these terms are very important for those who want to help the war to stop, to clearly understand what we are talking about. Everybody will say, I want war to stop. Yes, let's applaud. So what? What does it mean to stop? Does it mean that there'll be no artillery, there'll be no air bombs, there'll be no sniper war, there'll be no sabotage group? What it will mean? Line of contact between Russia and Ukrainian troops is much longer than ours. Yes, it is different terrain. In our case, the line of contact was very advantageous for Armenia because they had a nature landscape which protected them and actually helped to keep occupation. Plus, during the ceasefire period for 26 years, they built sometimes 5, sometimes 6, sometimes even more lines of engineering lines. Trenches, barbed wire, minefields. So we have, every week, we have casualties on mines, almost 400 people. More than 70 of them killed, and others became severely wounded. So when people talk about ceasefire in Ukraine or peace in Ukraine, do they understand how difficult it will be to control the troops and What is the level of discipline in Ukrainian army and Russian army? I don't know. Maybe I know, but I don't want to comment. The level of discipline of Azerbaijani army is well known. We stopped on the outskirts of Hankendi by one order of commander-in-chief. So will that line of contact be safe and secure? Will those who want to mediate demand international peacekeepers on that line of contact, as they demanded it from us? Throughout the years of occupation, one of the consolidated messages of United States, Russia, and France was to bring so-called peacekeepers on the line of contact. So what it meant? It meant that they wanted us to agree for occupation. If peacekeeper comes to the line of contact, which is occupied, that means that you should say goodbye to your territory. And no country, at least in my understanding, will agree to compromise on territorial integrity. And to expect Ukraine to agree that they will sacrifice the international recognized territory in exchange of peace, I think is not fair and is not realistic. Because one thing is to say good things, let's stop the war. And the second thing is to go a little bit deeper and maybe to ask those who had the war recently and what kind of arrangements it needs to create a sustainable peace. Since 1994 May, when we had a ceasefire with Armenia, the war never stopped. There have been different clashes. There was April 2016, when we demonstrated Armenians that they should leave the territories. We didn't want to enter in a large-scale military operation. That's why it lasted only 3 days. But we demonstrated them that we can liberate territories, and we liberated territories. Small, but they did not take that lesson. And then there were several more. The sniper war never stopped throughout 26 years. And even now, you can see that a lot of shootings on our border coming from Armenia. And if ours shoot, they shoot only in response. Discipline in Armenian army is very low. They recruited people who never served or maybe served 30 years ago in army, civilians, these so-called paramilitary groups, veteran groups, and people who do not serve in the regular army because of lack of human resources in Armenia. So all these questions, of course, it's a big topic, so we can talk hours about that. But without addressing this core issue, it will not work. Me personally, being a realist, I do not see in the foreseeable future any prospect for peace between Ukraine and Russia. Russia declared occupied territories as part of Russia. How they can step back from that? Ukraine considers, as the whole world, these occupied territories as part of Ukraine. And Azerbaijan considers them as part of Ukraine. How can they sacrifice and say, no, it's not part of Ukraine? Well, if it happens, then it means that I do not understand something in international politics. And unfortunately, wars end when there is a final capitulation act. As our friend mentioned from Croatia, they liberated their territory, came to their border, and stopped. And we did the same. We came to our border and stopped. That's how the wars end. This is real world.
The inaugural EU Central Asia High-Level Summit held on April 4 in Samarkand marked a major milestone in Brussels' evolving strategy toward Eurasia. As global power shifts to reshape regional dynamics, the summit underscored the EU's ambition to deepen ties with Central Asia through trade, connectivity and energy. Now to discuss this, joining us Mohammad Mammadov, researcher fellow at Top Chubashev Center from Baku. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
In what ways can Azerbaijan leverage its position in the Middle Corridor to influence EU policies and gain strategic advantages?
Well, after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Azerbaijan found itself in the center of the Middle Corridor that gained strategic importance because of two main reasons. First one is transportation, because before Russia's invasion of Ukraine, it was mostly Russian route that the EU and Chinese companies were using to reach each other and for intercontinental rail trade. But after the war, it became clear that it was a strategic mistake for the EU to rely on the Russian route. So Middle Corridor became more strategic, and the EU companies started to use the Middle Corridor for reaching out to China and Central Asia. So in that regard, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, and Georgia and Turkey started to invest more and increase both hard and soft infrastructure capacity of the road. And the second point is the EU started to see Central Asia's critical raw materials, strategic resources, as an alternative to decrease its dependence, strategic dependence, because as you know, these resources are very important for the development of military industry, multi-industrial complex, and at the same time for green technology, wind turbines, solar panels, and car batteries, electric car batteries. So right now, today, China accounts for about 70% of processing of those resources, and the EU is dependent on China for 2/3 of its supply. So today, the EU wants to divert its dependence away from China, and in that regard, Central Asia becomes very strategic. So it was not surprising that the Brussels signed different strategic partnership agreements with Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan to develop the region's critical raw material reserves and also develop processing capacity that they can decrease dependence on China. And these two issues, they are transit and critical raw material. Azerbaijan is at the center of EU efforts to diversify its supply chains away from dependence on China and Russia.
And could the EU's insistence on swift Armenia-Azerbaijan peace jeopardize its broader connectivity goals in the South Caucasus and Central Asia?
Right now, it's peaceful South Caucasus is in the interest of both Azerbaijan and the EU. So Azerbaijan leveraged the position that unlike the Russian route, which is highly destabilized because of the war in Ukraine, and the southern route, which passed through the Red Sea and Suez Canal, and which is highly destabilized because of Houthi attacks on the Red Sea shipping, the South Caucasus between Iran and Russia, two highly sanctioned countries, emerged as a highly stable route, alternative for intercontinental rail routes. So the difference is that the EU's position about the modality of the peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan leans more toward Armenian position that the peace agreement should be signed as soon as possible. So the summit declaration says that the signing of the peace agreement between Baku and Yerevan is prerequisite for the EU investment. So it means that the EU is leveraging, tying its investment in Central Asia to the signing of the peace agreement. It clashes actually with the Azerbaijani position because, as you know, Azerbaijan has two preconditions for signing the agreement, which are the constitutional amendments and the dissolution of its ministry. So in that regard, there are some kind of agreement. But, and I think it can have two key repercussions. One is that, as in the case of Georgia, EU's pressure in that regard could push Azerbaijan more toward Russia and China, which happened unluckily, of course, in the case of Georgia. And the other one is it can derail relations between Azerbaijan and its Central Asian partners, because in this case, Azerbaijan will emerge as an unconstructive country. So in that regard, it will lead to, of course, certain complications, but I do believe that the strategic importance of the Middle Corridor is so important that both Azerbaijan and European Union will find ways to come to a common point and leverage the route, let's say, advantages to gain have a win-win scenario.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. The Ministry of Defense of Azerbaijan has reported that Azerbaijani army positions came under intermittent fire from the Basar-Kechar direction on the evening of April 8. According to the statement, between 7:20 p.m. and 10:30 p.m., units of the Armenian armed forces stationed near the Gara Iman and Yuhari-Shorja settlements in the Basar-Kechar district opened fire using small arms toward Azerbaijani positions. Azerbaijan army units took adequate retaliatory measures in the mentioned directions. The ministry said, emphasizing that the situation is now under control. Uzbekistan is focusing on strengthening its ties with Arab states, marking a period of significant cooperation. Our Fariza Kalamurzana has more.
Uzbekistan sets its sights on bolstering cooperation with Arab states. In the last few years, several important agreements have been reached. Over 500 joint ventures have been launched, while investments have exceeded $15 billion. The leaders also addressed regional security and preparations for major international events, including the upcoming Central Asia Cooperation Council for the Arab States of the Persian Gulf Summit, set to take place in Samarkand this May. The first summit in this format was held 2 years ago in Jeddah, where the participants agreed to create new transport corridors connecting Central Asia with the Arab world. Discussions also touched on green energy, the digital economy, and innovation. But the relationship between these regions goes far beyond just trade. For Gulf Cooperation Council countries, it's not just about accessing Central Asia's rich resources like minerals, metals, and agricultural products. It's also about finding opportunities for economic diversification. Central Asia exports copper, gold, precious metals, iron, and steel to Arab nations. Saudi Arabia is one of the largest foreign investors in projects to modernize Uzbekistan's energy infrastructure and develop green energy. In fact, Uzbekistan and Saudi Arabia signed a landmark $12.5 billion deal last year. The talks between the two nations also covered regional peace and security, including the situation in Afghanistan. Uzbekistan continues to play a key role in Afghanistan's economic recovery through significant regional projects. The involvement of Gulf states in these efforts is crucial for stabilizing the region. But Uzbekistan is not the only regional player building relations with Arab states. A partnership dynamic between Kazakhstan and the United Arab Emirates is also interesting in this context. Last year, United Arab Emirates' direct investments in Kazakhstan more than doubled, and the two countries are now aiming to increase their trade turnover to $1 billion. There are also plans to launch 13 major projects in Kazakhstan, valued at about $3.8 billion by 2028. 4 of those projects will involve United Arab Emirates capital. From Almaty, Kazakhstan, Fariza Kalimurzana, A News.
You are watching A News. Stay tuned for more and have a wonderful day.